Hi, I'm Amy Kiser. Welcome to my talk about nutrition for mental health. I'm a board certified holistic nutritionist. I see clients privately and I also lead group programs. And I've also given some workshops along with a local therapist, Amanda Craig, actually. We've talked about seasonal affective disorder and also the burden of being a caregiver. So those are just some of the things we've done together, which is great. And I really appreciate being asked to speak here because honestly, HAYVN saved my mental health. I don't know about you guys, but I mean, having these half times has been really tremendous in terms of learning a lot and really seeing the community. I do want to, I'm going to just start sharing my screen. So before I get started, I do want to mention just a little disclaimer. Okay, come on. This does not want to. Okay, there we go. I just want to mention that I'm not a mental health or medical professional. I'm just providing some general tips around what to eat that could influence your mood. And if you have a significant mental health condition, please, or take some medication, please contact your healthcare provider before making any drastic changes to your diet or taking anything, because I do mention a supplement in this conversation. So, okay, now on to the more interesting part of the presentation. So as you probably know, COVID-19 has really impacted our moods and eating habits. I mean, there's so much I could say about mental health today, but I'm really focusing on kind of how some things that are easy to do using food and also that kind of have arisen as a result of COVID-19. We're cooking a lot more, but we're eating more. I mean, there's constant access to the refrigerator. Mealtime's really social and positive, and that's kind of what we want to do. We're soothing ourselves with food, though, throughout the day, oftentimes, and maybe it's a little better now that we're able to get out more. But many people have gained weight during this time. People are drinking more alcohol. So alcohol sales in April were up more than 200% than in April 2019, actually. We're finding COVID comfort foods. Sourdough starter was trending on social media. It's just so interesting. Everybody was breaking bread. French fries, frozen pizza, cake mixes, they were scarce. I went to Palmer's in Darien, like now they're limiting you to one every time you go in there. So those are some of the things people turn to, not the healthy foods. So, but I think the ironic part about all this is all this food is to self-soothe and help everybody's mental health, but most likely it's really doing the opposite. So what really should we eating to feel better? So I think what I wanted to get into before I answer that question is really consider what influences our mental health. So there are so many influences, today I'm focusing mostly on neurotransmitters. They're chemicals that generate signals in our brain. There are many different types of neurotransmitters, and there are even multiple types that influence mood. But I think the two main ones that you can really have a lot of the influence are serotonin and GABA. So serotonin, it influences happiness, it influences our body clock, and it can influence our anxiety level. So this is probably the most common one you've heard about. And there are drugs on the market called SSRIs, or serotonin selective reuptake inhibitors, and they try and keep serotonin circulating in your brain so that you can actually be less depressed or anxious. I mean, this is for more extreme people who are experiencing anxiety and depression might be taking those. I'm going to talk about kind of a more natural way using food to make sure you're getting enough serotonin. And then GABA really, it's interesting because if you're not getting enough GABA, you probably feel physically anxious. If you're getting panic attacks, things like that, that might mean that your GABA is low. It tends to be a feeling of fear, but it's a physical feeling. Serotonin, if you're anxious, you have ruminating thoughts. GABA, if you're anxious, it's more feeling feeling tense. So, and also if you're low in GABA, you actually might suffer from some insomnia. Believe it or not, the drug Ambien increases your GABA levels. So any questions before I go on, Kathy? I can't see the chat, that's why I'm asking. Nope.
Actually, Amy, I had a question. So,
Yeah, sure.
so what about melatonin?
So melatonin is actually made from serotonin. So if you don't have enough serotonin, that's another thing that might happen is your sleep can be affected by that as well. Um, Melatonin is also, it's important that you get enough sunlight, because that actually helps to drive your melatonin. And also, if you have too much cortisol, cortisol is also something that can cause anxiety. It's a hormone. And so really your cortisol is supposed to rise during the day, and then your melatonin is supposed to rise as you're getting into the evening, and as your cortisol goes down. If your cortisol melatonin balance is off, then you might not be getting enough melatonin. So that's why actually if you take a melatonin supplement, they tell you to take it at dusk, because that's kind of when your melatonin is increasing. So, all right, good question. All right, so just related to neurotransmitters, I'm sure you've heard a lot about the gut-brain connection. So actually the interesting part of this is that the majority of the neurotransmitters that I just mentioned are actually made in your gut. They're linked by your vagus nerve, which runs actually from your brain on your right side of your body all the way down to your gut through your different organs. And that's the way serotonin is actually made in your gut. 80% is made, and then 20% is made in your brain. But the amount that's made in your gut actually gets to your brain through your vagus nerve. And then GABA is made in both your gut and the brain. But there are a few things that can happen to affect how neurotransmitters are made in our gut. Like if your gut digestion is impacted due to IBS, irritable bowel system, and I'm not going to get into the causes of that or anything, but just so you know, if you're not digesting things well, your stomach isn't right, or your intestines aren't, things are not processing well, your neurotransmitters might not be made in sufficient quantities, which affects mood. What's kind of interesting is that people with IBS are have a threefold increased odds of having either anxiety or depression compared to healthy people who don't have IBS. There was a study published about that, which was really interesting. And then if you're not eating enough of specific nutrients, that can affect neurotransmitter production. So this is more what I'm going to focus on today, is what to eat. And just a spoiler alert, neurotransmitters are made from amino acids, which are the building blocks of protein. B vitamins, especially B6, are also necessary in order to convert some of the amino acids into the neurotransmitter, and that's especially for GABA. And then, believe it or not, omega-3s, there have been a lot of studies talking about the importance of omega-3s in treatment for depression. So I'll talk a little bit about that too. All right, any questions in chat?
No, not right now. Come on, guys. If you have any questions, feel free. Amy is like amazing. So just throw them in chat, and I will let her know when there's something there. She can't actually see the chat, so
That's why I keep asking. Okay, so what should you eat? This is kind of the bulk of the presentation. So as I mentioned before, neurotransmitters are made from amino acids. Serotonin is made from tryptophan. And so that's one, and then GABA is made from glutamic acid. And those are both amino acids, which again are the building blocks of protein. So the bulk of those amino acids are in animal and fish sources. So you really need to make sure you get enough. This gets a little challenging for vegans, as you can imagine, but even if you're a vegetarian, if you can try and eat eggs and get some dairy, these animal and fish sources are really important to eat. Try and get some protein at every single meal. And I'll give you some ideas too for what are good protein sources, especially at breakfast, because it seems like that's a harder time. And then another thing too, as I mentioned, vitamin B6 rich foods. These include salmon, chicken breast, pork chops, beef. which is interesting because most of those are also in the proteins that you should be eating to get the right amino acids. But also vitamin B6 is in bananas, potatoes, avocados, and pistachios. And one thing that it's better to get B6 from foods rather than supplements, because it can actually lead to some nerve damage if you're getting too much B6 in your supplements. So try and get it from foods. I also have probiotics here because, as I mentioned before, these neurotransmitters are made in the gut. So it's interesting because you have to have the right different gut bacteria in order to make them. So eating probiotics is really essential too. So I try and eat some Bubby's. I have Bubby's sauerkraut there because it's a great sauerkraut that's made from actually fermenting the cabbage, not adding any kind of vinegar or something to it. And that's found in the refrigerator section of Whole Foods. I've seen that. And I think it's also in Stop and Shop. I have kefir there. I have unsweetened kefir that has a lot of probiotics in it. The kinds that are specific for making serotonin and GABA are lactobacillus and bifidobacterium. And those are tend to be in fermented foods. And they're also in this supplement I have here called Claire Therabiotics Complete. Not all probiotics supplements are created equal. This one you actually have to store in your refrigerator. It's a little pricier, but it's really good for getting those specific probiotics that you need to help make the GABA and serotonin. Okay, so I actually saw a couple of questions come up, and now I can see them. Yay. Are there good suggested amounts? And is kombucha a good source for probiotics? So it's hard to know in terms of if you're taking a supplement, you want to get, like this one is 25 billion CFUs, and that's so many of them end up being like our stomach acid can kill probiotics. So more is better, to be perfectly honest. And if you're taking a supplement, so I would say around that amount is a good amount. If you're in terms of fermented foods, sometimes people can't tolerate them. So I always tell them, especially sauerkraut, depending on how their gut bacteria, how much good bacteria is in your gut versus bad in terms of the ratio. So I always tell people to just take a tablespoon and start out with that a day and see how that goes. Because if you tend to get bloating, then you want to decrease it. But if you don't have that, then you can just keep increasing it. Kombucha is good, but just watch the sugar content because that can actually work against you because it can cause kind of a candida or yeast in your body. So that's the only issue with kombucha is the sugar. These sauerkraut and then kefir that doesn't have sugar are actually better for that reason. There's also a really great water that is made, that's fermented, that tends to be low in sugar. It's called Kavita. And it tastes like kombucha, but it doesn't have all the sugar. And there's a mojito flavor that's really good. It's lime coconut. And there's another one that's cayenne ginger or cayenne lemon. I can't remember which is with it, but they're both really low in sugar. So, and when I say low, it's just good to have, probably around 5 grams of sugar in a drink is probably the maximum I would recommend. Kombucha tends to be higher, but the Kavita is, I think, 3 grams, which is great. Good question. Okay, so I wanted to speak about just a lot of people have a hard time getting protein in every meal, and it's a really good idea. And this maybe Kate is answering your question. I wasn't sure about probiotics or protein, but I would try to get at least 20 grams of protein at every meal if you can, minimum, in order to make sure you're getting enough of these amino acids. More is great. And I would try to, just to give you an example, 7 grams of protein, it equals around 1 ounce of protein. So say like at least 3 ounces of protein at every meal would be a good thing. 20 grams or 3 ounces. So here's some ideas at breakfast. When clients of mine typically have trouble getting their protein, these are the things I recommend. The no sugar or Applegate sausages are in the frozen section of Whole Foods. I've seen them in Stop and Shop, and they're really good. You can just heat them up in the microwave. They're really fast if you're looking for a fast breakfast. I think 3 of them represents around 9 grams of protein, so that's good. And I also love nitrate-free bacon, nitrate-free so that you're not getting the carcinogens of nitrates are considered carcinogens. So that's Trader Joe's nitrate-free bacon, which is a great value. It's $5.99 a package. Don't do bacon every day, but a couple times a week, that's not a bad idea. I have here a form of protein powder that I love called OWYN, OWYN. And the great thing about this is it's made from pumpkin seeds and chia seeds. And pumpkin seeds actually have tryptophan in them. They're like one of the few vegetable sources that does. So that's a great source. And also pumpkin seeds have a lot of zinc, which help your immune system. So that's just kind of a cool thing. And it tastes really good. No dairy, no gluten. Then I have bone broth. I mean, just a thought, have some bone broth at breakfast, or if you don't drink breakfast, have it instead of your coffee or tea. 1 big cup of bone broth can have up to 10 grams of protein in it. It has really good gut healing glutamine, which actually is a precursor for GABA. That's the particular amino acid that makes GABA, so that's good. And Trader Joe's has really great bone broth in the meat section. So this one I get from Whole Foods, but that's another idea. One thing too, people, if they're egg eaters or they don't want a huge breakfast, they eat some eggs and they heat them up in bell peppers, which gives you some vitamin C. If they're yellow, that gives you vitamin A too. So then those are both immune boosting vitamins. You can put them in the oven for about 20 minutes at 350, and it's just a different kind of breakfast to have. And then finally, in the upper left side, I have collagen peptides. And this brand I love. It's at Costco. The thing that's tricky about collagen peptides is they have all the other amino acids, but they don't have tryptophan. So don't rely on that as your only source of protein. It'll give you the things you need to make GABA and some other neurotransmitters, but it doesn't have tryptophan. So make sure you get other protein sources during the day. But that's great if you add it to your coffee. If you're just looking for protein in general, add it to your coffee and it just, you can't taste it. It completely dissolves, and it can give you 10 grams of protein and just 30 calories. So I think I saw a couple questions, but now I can't access. Yeah, there we go. The bar disappears. That's what happens. So I can't see. Did you say 20 grams of protein per meal is recommended? Yes, that's what I said, Virginia. So 20 grams, which is around 3 ounces. That's the minimum. So, okay. All right, so I am gonna try and get my screen to respond. There we go. Okay, so I mentioned that omega-3s can also help with depression. And there was a study, a meta-analysis, meaning a study of all these studies on mental health and omega-3s done in 2014. And it indicated that patients with depression and depression symptoms benefited when they took omega-3 fatty acid supplements. You can also, obviously the best way to get it is through food. Fish is the best way to get it, specifically cod, salmon, tuna, halibut, shrimp. Those tend to be bigger fish is, so you can also get them from sardines and mackerel. But I guess the challenge of the bigger fish is sometimes it can have, I would get wild caught because those tend to be more dense in omega-3s. And they also have, like they're eating what the fish should be eating. So that actually helps you get more omega-3s. And then also you can get omega-3s from some other sources that are more, that are grown. But the challenge with that is it's coming from alpha linolenic acid, so that will actually, your body has to make it into the two kinds, EPA and DHA, that you can see on that supplement, which your body makes into, like absorbs more readily. So those are there are so many different types of omega-3s, and ALA is made into EPA and DHA. And I would recommend getting at least 1,000 milligrams per day if you can. If you're and it's great for reducing inflammation as well, and actually, which is great for COVID-19, because that inflammation can happen when you are when you get COVID-19, there's an inflammatory storm. So taking fish oil on a regular basis can help not only with mood, but can also help with your immune system if you happen to get the virus. So yeah, and this is a brand that I like because it's tested. That's one thing you have to make sure it's tested for different mercury and other metals, which can happen in fish because of all the things we put in our oceans today. I think I saw another question, but I can't get this to come up.
I can read it for you if you want.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry.
So the question is, I take vegetarian omega-3 supplement because the fish oil upsets my stomach. Is that a good option?
As long as your body, we don't really know how well your body converts ALA to EPA and DHA, and I think that's the challenge. Is it could be helping you, but it's better to get the EPA and DHA directly. If you are open to taking a fish oil supplement, that there's one brand called Nordic Naturals that might not upset your stomach. So you could try that. I mean, unfortunately, trying it means having to buy a $25 bottle. but they actually, there's some brand, if you're getting fishy burps, that will help decrease that from happening, because what they do is they add a little bit of lemon flavoring. And so for some reason, I think it must be more digestible too in the capsule that it's in, but between those two things, it could help. So, and that's a well-tested brand. Okay. All right, and then all good questions. And so here, these are my mood adjustment shortcuts. Like okay, so you're eating the right things, or maybe you just don't always have time to eat the right things. I'm gonna preface this by saying everybody's bio-individual. It's so hard for me when I mention things that are supplements because I don't know you personally, but these are some things that generally could help. So L-theanine is actually made with green tea. It crosses the blood-brain barrier, and it can enhance levels of dopamine as well as serotonin and GABA that we talked about. Dopamine is another feel-good neurotransmitter. And it helps to balance. It doesn't help to have too much of any one neurotransmitter, so that's why it's kind of a nice supplement. It tends to be safe for most people, and it can help with focus, and it can also help a little bit with sleep because of the GABA balancing aspect. So that's one thing. And I love, like, this brand. It's at Whole Foods, and it has something called, it's the sun-theanine form, which is a little more absorbable. So in terms of dosing, I would just try taking one at first, but you could actually end up taking up to 4, but I wouldn't take more than 2 at one time, like 4 a day, but I wouldn't take more than 2 at one time. But that's just something, it can actually help you feel a little more balanced, focused. It won't be like this great, huge, but it can help your body feel a little bit more, less anxious, let's put it that way. And then magnesium is actually helps also to make your GABA. It's important for formation of that. This is something, and it's also helpful for relaxation. I know some people that take this before bed. It can also help with constipation. So you want to really be careful of not taking too much, because it can actually have the opposite effect. This is a powder. It's actually found at Whole Foods. You can also find it on Amazon, and you put it in water. You put it in a little warm water and add some cooler water to drink it. And up to 90% of people are deficient in magnesium. And it's because really our soil's over-farmed. It used to be abundant in our soil, and it's not anymore because of pesticides and the over-farming, all those things. You can also get magnesium from chocolate, dark leafy greens, nuts, avocados, and beets. But the amount you get out of those things isn't always a lot. So if you can try taking some magnesium, because of the fact that most people seem to be deficient, but I wouldn't, just don't overdo it. Monitor, it says, I think 2 teaspoons, but I would start with even half a teaspoon of this and to just start to make sure you don't have some bad effects. Another thing too is valerian root. That also can increase your GABA, but that's an herb, but I don't necessarily have a brand that I like, but that's just something to keep in mind. And you can talk to somebody at Whole Foods about dosage. I don't necessarily have the right dosage or brand for you, but that's just another idea. And then finally, a lot of my clients, especially for younger clients, really love essential oils, and they have a profound effect on them. So lavender they've done studies on lavender in terms of actually helping with reducing anxiety. Bergamot also, bergamot actually helps with depression. So that's something to consider too. Some of the citrus essential oils can help with focus and also mood and providing more of an uplifting mood, and bergamot's one of the better ones. And vetiver, I've actually used sometimes. I've diffused when it's time to go to sleep. It smells, I shouldn't say taste, it smells very woodsy, and it's very, very thick, so it's kind of hard to get in a diffuser, but it just really can help you relax and have a really nice sleep. So that's just another thing. Lavender also can do that too, but those are really great essential oils, and I actually am a doTERRA representative too. I can help you based on if you're interested in any of those. So now I can see the chat. Okay. Can omega-3, hold on, be sufficient from foods such as almonds, nuts, as opposed to supplements? So it's not as, there isn't as much, and again, it's the wrong form. So what you're trying to get is EPA and DHA. Those are the two, like there are a lot of different omega-3s. So ALA, which is in the almonds, nuts, and vegetable forms, break down into EPA and DHA. So it's a little bit harder for your body to do. You can get some of it, but you might not get as much. So it's better to actually find a fish source, or another great source too are eggs. So that's another thing to consider too. Eggs are a great source. They don't necessarily have a ton, but they do have EPA and DHA. Yeah, valerian, Kathy says, tastes kind of awful. I've never taken it, but I've heard that actually. So, and I think that's, wow, I'm sorry, I've exceeded my time, but that's it. I really appreciate you're all listening. And again, you can reach me. You know, this is a topic that you might not necessarily want to ask questions publicly, so I'm happy to have you contact me through my email, or I also offer, and it's not listed here, a free 30-minute consultation where we can just talk a little bit about any personal questions you have about food and mental health. I'd love to, I can do it obviously through Zoom or on the phone, but I'm happy to do that. And so I really appreciate having the chance to talk to you all about this today.
So thanks again, Amy Kiser from Jane Street Wellness. Such a joy to have you on our HAYVN Halftime. And I'm going to stop recording and we're going to go to a discussion.